Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Racket Athlete Podcast, Racket Sports Performance with Chris Nichol. And today we have on a guest from the Manchester area, Thomas Fairhurst. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, good to see you, Chris. Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. So today we're going to have a varied chat with Thomas about a few things about his book, also about talent ID within squash, within junior squash, what also he does. So let's start with, what's your background in squash, Thomas?
So I'm the head coach at the National Squash Centre in Manchester, and I'm an England Squash High Performance Award coach. Alongside my National Squash Centre role, I'm head coach the Northwest of England for England Squash on the Aspire programme, and I work across the talent pathway at junior level. Been coaching for approaching 19 years in June, predominantly with junior programmes of all ages and levels. And I've just recently started my PhD studies, my doctorate studies at Birmingham City University. So very involved in squash across the board.
Yeah. So let's start with the book you're looking to write or writing. Is that correct? Or
yeah. So I'm writing a chapter for a book for what's called the Tide Society. Professor Adam L. Kelly, he's my tutor at Birmingham City University, and he and his colleagues are launching this sort of research society, or looking at talent identification, development, environments in sport. That's TIDES. That's the acronym. So I am writing a chapter for the book they're publishing this year, all about different sports, and I'm discussing an element of talent ID in squash and how we categorize young players by age.
Right. And with talent ID, let's focus a bit on that for a bit now. So that's something you're obviously going to research as well, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's for my doctorate studies. Yeah.
So you mentioned there about classing juniors within age. Do you think that's the only thing they should be classed in when they're becoming a player or an athlete?
So obviously we work on age to try and create like a fair playing field, and you move up on your birthday. A number of sports have fixed cut-offs, so 1st of September or 1st of January quite typically. Squash is quite unique where we work in 2-year brackets and you move up on your birthday. So you have a period of time of being the youngest in your age group, possibly where you maybe don't win as much, but you're more learning, and then possibly you move towards being older in your age group, where you may begin to win a little bit more, and you're the senior one within your category. Then you have your birthday, and up you go. Other sports, there's been studies done in football about categorizing young players based on biological maturity status. We go off dates of births, but obviously there can be a lot of variation within that. So I think it's being mindful of the variation you can have within an age group.
Yeah. So I think let's touch on that point on what sort of variations have you seen within age group since you've been coaching for 19 years?
So you can have a lot of physical differences between players, with boys and girls here. So you can have an early maturer who potentially could be quite tall or quite strong or quite powerful. Some type of power, speed-based attributes, which can be a big advantage at young ages. You can have someone who maybe is a later developer. So perhaps later into their teenage years, they then start to physically catch up. And there's all sorts of work done across different sports, looking at advantages and disadvantages of being early maturers and late maturers. It could also be from a cognitive side, so it could be psychological. So you can have two, for example, 12-year-olds who could be very different in their physical maturity, their psychological development, and no two players are ever the same. And I think that's the thing I've learned most coaching, is there's so much variation, not one answer fits all.
Yeah, not one answer definitely doesn't fit all when you're coming to juniors and their growth maturation and all that. Yeah, because it can be someone that's say 12 is close to 5'6", whereas somebody that's 12 could be 5'3" or something like that, right? But
Yeah.
again, there is advantages to those things as well, because yeah, so I think you're kind of spot on with that. Nothing fits one size, doesn't fit all with this sort of ID sort of stuff you're talking about. So can we go more into that and how you've used that sort of in your 19 years of coaching?
Yeah. So I think it's certain attributes of young players can be more obvious to spot than others. So we tend to work. I say we as a sport can probably look at who the fixing things like rankings, tournament results. That can be quite heavily influenced by potentially a physical advantage for someone. It could, like I said, it could be psychological. It could also be training age. So you could have someone who's been exposed to high levels of coaching for a longer period of time. So especially at 10 to 12 years old, there can be a lot of variation. So it's being mindful of the different variations within those players. Not always looking for the hardest hitting player, for example.
Yeah,
So power can be quite important at a young age. I'm not saying it's not the most important skill, but it can be a very effective skill to win squash matches at young ages. Is just physicality and speed. As they get
yeah,
older, the technical side comes in of controlling the ball tactically, the whole lifestyle part of the game too. So I think as a coach, it's being very mindful of, if I'm watching some players, is that player potentially just more mature in one of those areas I've mentioned? Or also be mindful of someone might not be number one at the moment at under 11s, under 13s, but they could have a long term future by developing through the sports. We don't want to lose those people either. So we're trying to engage as
yeah.
many different players as we can across our
So
pathways and
that
sessions.
that comes back to those early developers and those late developers, right? Because if they're a late developer and someone tries to, they may say, right, you're not going to get there, but actually they may get there, but just not at the right same time as someone else.
Yeah, it could just be a longer journey. Yeah, I've been reading a study. I forget who it was by now, but they were basically talking about you could be investing time and resource into someone who might not make it versus not giving someone resource who could make it but perhaps aren't the best at those early stages. And we can't predict the future as exactly as that,
No,
but being very aware of trying to give as many people the opportunity as possible.
yeah. How do you, with the juniors you've worked with or in the coaching you've done in the 19 years, how have you seen them go from junior to senior up that, whether they're an early developer or a late developer?
Um, yeah, most of my work has been probably people late primary school into early high school, probably mid high school, and a lot of the roles I've had. Those that have gone on to the senior game, they've obviously got some technical skills, but there's also the motivation, the
Yeah, the mindset.
determination to want to learn. Yeah, the mindset to want to learn and improve, do the
Mhm.
hard work. Because I do believe you get to a level of squash where most people can hit a good squash ball. It'll be
Yeah,
those who apply themselves the most, those that put that extra bit of work in to make sure they are the best that they can be.
yeah,
Um, I think that's a really important part because when you're transitioning into the senior game, it's a very tough environment to be in. You're no longer in your 2 year age bracket. You are playing open squash. You can play anybody, and
yeah.
that's quite an unforgiving environment.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. So let's touch on a bit more about mindset in squash and what you've seen from the junior side then, and how they develop through mindset in the juniors situation, and then obviously if they've been able to get past the junior situation into the seniors, how have you seen that develop with what you've done in your coaching?
I think it's about the player being like coachable, like inquisitive, wanting to learn, curious to improve.
Yeah.
I do believe there are some players who are they're like sponges. They want information. They want to strive for better, and it's our job as coaches to facilitate that and help that. If you've got someone who is always asking questions, who when you as a coach ask a question to a group, they are keen to answer, they're keen to listen, keen to try things too, not too set in their ways. That can really accelerate that development, or actually it could hold them back because they might have had success with what they do now, but that might not be good enough as they transition up the age groups into open squash. So that openness to learn and change, really important.
Yeah. So let's touch on that open to learning mentality. Do you teach this a lot to when you're coaching to coach them to want to learn more as well, or do you just have this sort of structure that's like stuck to and that is sort of how it works? Or
I think I try and approach it in a way where we try and ask questions or give challenges and tasks where hopefully the player can find their answer for themselves, because most of the players I work with play a lot of matches without me being present than me being present. So they've got to solve that for themselves in tournaments. But when we come to our training sessions, it's a lot of the coaches I work with on various sessions and pathways will be encouraging, just try something. And we're not interested in who wins in today's training session. We don't very rarely do we write scores down. It's about, this is the skill we're working on. It could be the technical side, the tactical side, whatever it may be. Let's give it a go and almost try and create that environment where they can make mistakes, but if it doesn't quite work, we can ask, well, how can we make that better? Or what do you think? Those questions that hopefully engage the player. So try not to tell them, try and get them to find the answer, and then we can prompt. But having that space where they don't have to worry about losing in training. They don't have to. There's no ranking. There's no scoreboard. It's just are we learning and improving, and obviously enjoying it too. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. So it's about asking the right questions to the players that are looking for that even if they haven't got that initial thought of, I want to ask the question, I want to ask the coach, but then you start asking them questions, they think, maybe I should be thinking about this a bit more, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we're working obviously we're an individual sport, but when we work in a squad, so it could be, so I've got my Manchester Squash Academy at the National Centre, my North West England squad as part of my overall. One of the things I quite often say to players is if there could be someone else in the group or in your court working on something that might help you too. And I believe if the group average level improves, your level will improve too within that. So I could be talking to another player on your court, but there could be a little piece of information there that might just make them think, oh, I could try that too, or I've had that same problem. And also try to get players to help each other. Yes, they do compete against each other, but trying to create that space where they might try and help each other out a little bit. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's what we strive for.
Yeah, it's an individual sport sometimes as well, though. So you want that camaraderie, but also they're there to learn for themselves as well, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Let's talk a bit about your 19 years as a coach so far. Let's go dive a little bit into that. So, how did that first start for you? How did you actually, obviously, we spoke about it in the start bit, but let's go a bit more depth. Where did your taste for squash come from, and also what led you to be at this point in 19 years and now you're doing your PhD?
So I started squash. So I'm Manchester born and bred, and we had the 2002 Commonwealth Games. And in the build up to those games, schools in Manchester were given opportunity to try different sports. I went to a squash taster session, having already been playing tennis at the time, and I then transitioned over to squash. I've played ever since. That was probably age 9. I'm actually sat in the building that was built for the Commonwealth Games now. Those games changed my whole trajectory of all my life, really, what I do for work, what I do for fun. It's funny to think back how just walking into that taster session changed a lot of things. I now have the job of the person who delivered that taster session, so it's gone full circle. From me being that primary school child trying the sport to me working with a lot of schools trying to get them to try the sport. In terms of my coaching, I snuck onto my level 1 when I was 15. I was a couple of weeks short of my 16th birthday. I had to wait till I was 16 to get my certificate. I'd begun helping out at my local club just on a Saturday morning, 2 hours, and before you know it, it just snowballed into more and more hours and work into a full-time role that I've now got.
Brilliant. So let's talk a bit about what you've actually written in that chapter of the book. You've written it, right? It's done, is it? Or
I've sent it a draft earlier this week.
Are you able to discuss it at all? Or So let's discuss a bit about that chapter you've written about squash and how it may help develop squash in the future.
So this particular chapter, I'm working with Adam Kelly and Mark Jeffries, who have worked together before, and they've published 2 papers on squash. There's a real gap of squash research in academic fields. So this particular chapter is discussing how, I mentioned before, we work in 2-year age brackets and you move up in your birthday. So we call it birthday banding, how it can be a good way of developing young squash players because they get exposed to different environments, and they get to work with different coaches, they get to work with different players. So as a sport, there's a lot of upside to how we operate our talent pathway. We select our squads on a squad by squad basis at England squash level. We have tournaments throughout the season. We don't operate on a fixed date. So this chapter is basically discussing the work that Adam and Mark have done previously with their colleagues. And I'm now looking into the characteristics of what squash coaches will identify as talent. So we've got this birthday banding strategy, and it's got these upsides, as I've just mentioned. And now I'm curious to know if you, Chris, were to go and watch 2 children playing, let's say they are 8 to 12 years old, what would you identify as? I'm not a big fan of the word talent because I think it can distract.
I think it's
maybe the word potential. But what would you look at? And then if I asked a coach in somewhere else in the UK or potentially abroad, like, I don't know, with US, Egypt, or Australia, France, anywhere in the world, what do they identify? And I'm quite curious to investigate that more through what I'm going to be studying.
So do you think that's a case about like how people identify things differently is about the cultural way things could be with squash in each different country, and also just what the general consensus is in that country about squash?
I think there'll be a lot of without investigating it further, I think there'll be a lot of universal themes. I don't think you can be a top squash player without certain attributes.
Absolutely.
Need the technical side. I had a discussion with a few coaches recently, and we were saying you still need to have some physical attributes. You don't have to be the strongest, fastest child at the start. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a very good squash player, but it's quite hard to make it to the top of our sport without some athletic base. And then with this, and then some of the coaches, we had some conversations around the psychological side. So it'll be interesting to know what qualities are prioritized. At the moment, we tend to classify children based on what they've achieved now and in the past for selection for things moving forward.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get better at identifying what we think is talent, what we think is potential.
So in regards to your research for your PhD, is that going to be just based in the UK, or are you going to look at other countries as well?
Still to be decided, in all honesty.
Yeah, because that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think if I made it wider than the UK, it'd probably be more generalizable across squash. If I made it England squash based, or maybe UK, like Team GB's, obviously the team for the Olympics, the Three Nations joining, that could be more specific. So I think there's a pro and a con. If I go more specific, you can get some real detail.
So,
if you go wider, it can be more generalized. So it's conversations I need to have with the team at Birmingham City University.
Yeah. Let's chat a bit about your thoughts on squash getting into the Olympics and how it will affect the sport in the next 5 to 10 years in your eyes, do you think?
It'll be interesting. I'm not sure it's going to massively revolutionize what we see, but I don't think it's going to do any harm either. I think the World Tour, we know it's growing year on year, prize money, tournaments all over the world. I'm hoping what it will do is give squash exposure to as many countries as possible, as many audiences as possible. I said about my journey from the Commonwealth Games into where I am now, and hopefully there'll be someone or some people out there who can use these Olympics, whether it be a governing body, whether it be clubs, and to try and really get some more people playing this great sport. I don't think it's suddenly going to create millions of dollars worth of prize money in the World Tour, but I don't think it does any harm to have that Olympic status, and hopefully we can continue to be in the Olympics for a long time to come.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. I think it's a great thing for the sport, for exposure to different countries, and even if guys and women are getting on the tour, from the tour into the teams, whatever country they're in, that's also great for them, right? So it's all round, it's good for the sport. I agree with that, definitely. Let's move on to, so you currently coach how many people, Thomas? How many groups do you have?
Quite a number. So most of my day-to-day coaching is sort of recreational sort of level juniors, playing once, maybe twice a week for the fun of it, which is great. And then within that, I've got my Manchester Squash Academy, where we've got about 20 players, age 9 to about 14. And they are all playing in regular competitions. So we've had players make the final of British Championships. We've had an England #1. And then we've got other players that are playing county and regional level and are progressing well for their age and enjoying it. And that's what we want. And then I've got my North West England squad that I lead as well.
Nice.
So 32 players in that, but
32
that
players,
quite a lot.
Yeah, of course. So one final thing I'd like you to answer to me is, if someone was watching this right now and you as a coach, they said to you, how do I move my game to another level, and with one tip from you, what would it be? Or make a change in my game for the better, what tip would you give them as a coach?
I think a lot of amateur players of various ages try and hit the ball too hard and don't use enough height on the front wall. So a lot of it is fast pace, hit the ball quite low, quite hard, and that ability to use the height of the front wall. So that could be a technical thing with the grip or spacing. I would encourage players to explore more height and different speeds on the front wall. That'd be my one. And then solo practice. I've get to the club 10 minutes early and have a practice before your mate turns up for the game, or stay 5 minutes after the game's finished. That'd be my areas.
Okay, great. Any final words today, Thomas? Apart from obviously,
just thank you for having me on, and I'm looking forward to hearing future episodes that you do, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I find from my studies, and I'll share with you what I find as and when it comes about.
That'd be excellent. Yeah, that'd be great. So thanks for coming on today, Thomas.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed it.
Right. Yeah, it's another episode of the Racket Athlete podcast with Chris Nichol and Thomas Fairhurst, and we'll speak to you soon.